on my list of things to watch. And as you probably know, I sent them a letter just recently, and I said, you're going to have to make a decision one way or the other. And we're going to either have to talk and talk it out, or very bad things are going to happen to Iran. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen. My big preference, and I don't say this through strength or weakness, my big preference is we work it out with Iran. But if we don't work it out, bad things are going to happen to Iran.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That was Donald Trump earlier today at the White House. I am joined, as I am on most Fridays when I am lucky, by Matt Continetti at the American Enterprise Institute, Washington Free Beacon columnist, Commentary Magazine columnist, and commentary podcaster. Matt, I want to begin with the most important thing. The president said that today, even as 7 B-2s are parked at Diego Garcia. What do you think he is prepared to do?
Well, I think the deployment of the B-2s to that strategic location, Hugh, is a sign that he's prepared to use strength, and he's prepared to show the Iranians that he's willing to use military force to defeat, disable, and set back their nuclear program. Whether he does that, I think, is another question. But he's definitely showing a readiness to do so that I think Tehran will notice.
Now, Tehran could do it the easy way. South Africa denuclearized. Ukraine denuclearized. It is possible to do it, but the first step is you open the doors to everything, and you ask the IAEA to come in and inspect, and then the world monitor. It is possible to do that. Do you think Iran is likely to do that?
Well, it's possible for Hamas to lay down its arms, to release the remaining hostages, to release the bodies of the dead hostages, and to leave Gaza. But Hamas doesn't do it because Hamas is a genocidal terrorist organization bent on Israel's destruction. The regime in Tehran is similarly ideological. It is a revolutionary regime. It came to power in 1979. Its whole ideology is about death to America and death to Israel. So whether Iran is willing to give up this nuclear program, the full kit and caboodle, in a act of deference to the President of the United States demands, is something that I consider highly unlikely. I think it's much more likely, Hugh, that the Iranians are going to try to do what they've done for the past 20 years. They're going to try to divert the United States into endless negotiations, and they're going to try to hold out that carrot of a diplomatic solution for as long as it takes so that they can get through the Trump presidency, just as they've gone through earlier American presidents.
Matt Continetti, I've always told people, I worked for developers for 30 years. Donald Trump is a developer at his soul. He knows when he's being played. I don't think he can be played by the mullahs. If he thinks he's being played, I think he's going to bomb Iran. Now, last night I got a call from an old friend, a Marine, retired Marine, serious conservative, serious about national security, doesn't want to go to war with Iran. I said, a 96-hour bombing campaign is not going to war with Iran. It can effectively demolish their nuclear program, and it doesn't have to go further than that, although I imagine they would try and retaliate some way. What do you think would be the effectiveness of 96 hours of B-2s and what the Iranian response would be?
Well, I do think that we would be effective. We have the capacity to deal huge blows to the Iranian nuclear program and to the Iranian ability to retaliate against the United States. Let's not forget, we destroyed the Iranian Navy during the tanker war in the late 1980s. Was that a war? It's not the war as we understand it today. It wasn't an endless war. It lasted a little bit of time. There were casualties. But we achieved our aim. And let's also not forget that Israel just recently destroyed the Iranian air defense system in Israel's response to the second of two unprovoked attacks on Israel by Iran last year. Israel took out their air defense system and also severely reduced their ability to manufacture their ballistic missiles. So we have the ability, I think, to deal a huge, heavy blow to the Iranian nuclear program and to subsidiary targets that would limit Iran's capacity to respond to us. Will they try to respond? Of course. Typically the mullahs opt for subterfuge. and they try to assassinate their opponents. They try to sponsor terrorist attacks. This is the world's largest sponsor of terrorism. And of course, they are still trying to assassinate President Trump for his role, his decision to take out Qasem Soleimani back in 2020. So no one wants this outcome, but we are reaching the moment of decision, Hugh, not just because that Iran is vulnerable right now, thanks to the Israelis, but also because Iran is dangerous and could get more
Very
so
close
with a
to
nuclear
nuke.
bomb.
Stand by for a second, Matt. We're going to go to a break. Come back right back during the break with Matt. It'll be on the podcast. Don't miss any of it. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. I am back with Matt Continetti. Matt, I did not listen to today's commentary podcast yet, so I don't know if you covered it. Israel passed judicial reform, and lo and behold, the Jewish state did not collapse. I've always thought it was kind of a weird sort of surrogate for hating on Netanyahu, and it's not that radical a reform, and it doesn't take effect until after at least one general election more. What did you make of what they did and the build up to it and the kind of non-response after it?
Well, Hugh, as you know, and as you've covered on the show this week, Israel is in the midst of a political crisis. Now, I'm of the view that as an outsider, I shouldn't get too involved in Israel's political crises. That's for Israel to decide. I'm more about defending Israel from its attacks here in the United States and from the broader anti-Israel network around the world. But I will say that the legislation you mentioned, which did increase the parliament's role in judicial selection, did pass. Israeli democracy is not over. At the same time, this bill was slightly smaller than the judicial reform that was proposed in the summer of 2023 that really was, as you say, the catalyst for a lot of anti-Netanyahu activity and almost tore the country apart. So I actually think this measure may have been the more responsible way to approach this subject piecemeal. And I think that Israel has plenty of strengths that will enable it to flourish despite what we might be reading in the media or what we might be hearing from the Israeli left.
Have you noticed that Haviv Rettig-Gur has begun a podcast called Ask Haviv Anything?
I have, and I often ask Haviv things. He's an authority and someone to definitely listen to on this subject.
So what I want to ask you is, why is he so good? I mean, so good that I could put him on every day. And I don't get into internal Israeli domestic politics. It's above my pay grade, and I don't know enough. I don't want to be stupid. So I ask him questions, but he's awfully persuasive. And I'm wondering, why is he that way?
Well, I think he has a wonderful sense of history. He knows the topic, he knows the region, and he also has excellent English. And I do think that a limit for many Israeli public figures when they speak to Western audience is their English is not as good as we often expect. I think the ability to speak and write in English is one reason why Benjamin Netanyahu has gone so far in Israeli politics, but also as the leader and symbol of the Jewish state for so long, for so much of the world. And so I think that ability to speak lucidly, to communicate so fluently is one of Haviv's many strengths as well.
And we're coming to a transition. For years and years and years, we've had Ron Dermer and Michael Oren and the Prime Minister himself talking to American audiences, and they need a bench. And I think Haviv Rettig-Gur is their bench, and it's a good bench. I'm coming right back on the network with Matt Continetti. Don't go anywhere, America. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Matt Continetti is my guest. Matt, I received this week, and I began last night, the book Fight by John Allen and Amy Parnes. Now, I'm embargoed from telling you what's in it. All I can say is it's going to be a #1 bestseller, and I am shocked. I mean, I'm really shocked. I think we're all going to be shocked about the Biden regency the more we learn about it. Do you think the American people have any idea about the last year of the Biden presidency?
Well, I think the American people have an instinct about the last several years of the Biden presidency. And let's not forget that it was pretty clear beginning in 2023 that majorities of Americans, including a majority of Democrats, did not want Biden to run for another term in office. So when you couple that with Biden's sustained unpopularity, indeed his record unpopularity, when we think about how he left office and the way that the public continues to view him today, the American people have known for some time that he was simply ill equipped to be the president of the United States. And he certainly did not deserve a second term and should not have run for a second term. As for the actual details, no, I think we aren't really prepared for what we might learn in some of these journalistic exposés. And this, I think the book that you mentioned will be the beginning of many that will talk about the state of the Biden White House as he deteriorated. You know, I've often wondered what was going on in some of those Biden group chats. You know, if we ever get access to those, I think the American people will be rightly scandalized once again.
We're going to get access to some of those, Matt. I won't say anything more than that. Let me ask you this. I'm not for constitutional amendments because they can't pass. But I'm beginning to think, although I have absolutely no doubt that President Trump has the energy and mental acuity to do the job, and in fact, benefited by the 4 years he was out of the job. And he's 78, and I think he's going to be just fine for the 4 years. But when we're done with that, do you think we ought to consider an age limit for the Supreme Court, the presidency? Not the Senate. You can be 110 and be in the Senate. That's a legislative job. What do you think about an age limit for the presidency and the Supreme Court?
When Nikki Haley surfaced this idea during the Republican primaries, I thought it was worth considering. You're right, constitutional amendments are very hard to pass unless you're President Biden and you can just create one with your auto pen, and a tweet. But if you want that constitutional amendment to be legitimate, it does take a lot of work and effort. I do think people will have a different view of older candidates going forward, and I think that's healthy. President Trump, of course, despite being close to 80, no one really sees him as suffering from any type of cognitive
No, he's got
decline.
the energy of a 30-year-old.
Exactly.
Ridiculous.
So it doesn't really apply to him. But down the line, I do think this rising generation of voters who have swung right, I think, are going to take older candidates with a heavy dose of skepticism.
I had Lord Andrew Roberts on this week, and I'm struck that not only was Biden not there, but Franklin Roosevelt wasn't there at Yalta, and Woodrow Wilson wasn't there for a half year. So we've had 3 brushes with this kind of a crisis in less than 110 years. We really can't do this anymore. Matt, let me turn to NPR. I don't think Catherine Maher is a bug. I think she's a feature. I think the media at NPR, PBS, and CPB has gone over the edge and over the cliff, and I will be personally disappointed if the Republicans do not end all 3 public funding. Now, they can exist as long as they want on the backs of their donors and their sponsors and their advertisers, but do you think we're done with them after that performance?
Well, I hope so. I mean, Maher in particular, it's amazing to me she's still in that role, even after the material was disclosed that came up during this hearing, all of the things she said about President Trump, all of her far left positions on race issues and on gender issues. She still somehow persists, and I think that Congress should fix that. It is interesting, Hugh. I've had people come to me and say, well, it's not always fair to lump NPR in with PBS, and that they're different audiences, and PBS is slightly different than NPR in its financial model. So I would, if I were a Republican congressman, I would focus on NPR, which is completely ideologized. If you look at what Uri Berliner, who left NPR to join the Free Press, has said about what's going on there, that is an institution that has it doesn't have the need for federal assistance, and it does not deserve any federal assistance.
And they do have some excellent journalists. I think Steve Inskeep is a national treasure. I don't think David Brooks is a conservative, but he certainly is a smart guy that I listen to and I read. But these institutions, they've all gone to the left, and that brings me to the Democratic Party. I think I have underestimated how far to the left they have gone. And I think the Overton window came up on the Commentary podcast this week. They really, or maybe it was Coward Piven, they have really gone over the edge. There are a few left, like Wes Moore and Chris Coons and Josh Shapiro, who are kind of old school center-left Democrats. But have I missed the fact that they drove the bus over the cliff?
No, you've been covering it pretty closely. I mean, just think about the headlines coming from the Democratic Party in recent weeks. You have the far left bombing Tesla dealerships. You have the Democratic Party is calling on Chuck Schumer to resign for funding the government. I mean, the Democrats are the party of government, and yet they're enraged at Schumer for keeping the government open. You have Bernie Sanders and AOC drawing these huge crowds on their tour, but Bernie Sanders and AOC are socialists. And if there's one thing that we've learned from the past 10 years is that the American people don't want socialism. So is it really in the Democratic Party's interests to put Bernie and AOC as their mascots? No, it's not. And yet the party is reeling toward that side of the political spectrum. And it's not healthy for the Democrats. There's going to have to be a turn if the Democrats going to get back into power. But that turn, I think, is a ways down the road.
You know, they can go the way of the Whigs. Parties do disappear. And from their remnants come a new party. And that may happen. I have one more segment with Matt Continetti, and we're going to talk about Elon Musk with Brett Baer on Thursday night. Don't go anywhere, America. I am back with Matt Continetti. Matt, last week, John Ellis of Ellis News Items sent me a note that Friends in the 80s averaged between 25 and 26 million viewers per episode. Their finale had 50 million viewers. Now, Sean Hannity, very good at his job. He averages 4 million viewers a night, more than NBC primetime shows. And Fox News has 14 out of 15 of the most watched shows in cable. I think we're also saying not just the collapse of the Democratic Party, but the collapse of broadcasting and legacy media. And I don't think I'm overstating it. I think they're really in a crisis. Do they have a plan?
Well, the broadcast networks have something of a plan, and it's streaming. Whether it works or not, we'll have to see. But the mainstream media as a whole, I think, has a big problem on its hands. And they're going to have to look toward alternative means of communicating with people, whether that is through online platforms, whether that's through streaming or podcasts. The Fox, we have to understand that the reason Fox is so popular is because Fox lives up to its mission. And it gives you the news up through 7 o'clock. And then after 7 o'clock, it gives you opinions. And it's opinions that resonate, unlike what the mainstream media offers so much of the time.
You know, it's also well produced, Matt. And I don't want to make too broad of a sweeping statement. The people on Fox are smarter than the people on the other networks. And by that, I think they read books. I think they read out of their niche. I think they try and stay informed across the spectrum of opinion. Do you think that they do that at the other news networks anymore?
Well, the other news networks, Hugh, suffer from living in the bubble. And this is just something that is an advantage for people who, even if they don't call themselves conservatives, want to play things fair and straight, is that you have to look at both sides. But what we know from liberal journalists is that they don't look at both sides. They look at their own side, and then they cast everyone to the right of them as a Trump-loving fascist or threat to democracy. And Americans aren't willing to accept that anymore. When you have President Trump winning the popular vote, winning every swing state, you see this cultural shift to the right, embrace of traditional values, traditional roles. They don't take the mainstream media seriously anymore. And
that's it.
It's looking more and more like a joke to most Americans.
And when people start to laugh at you, you're done. Matt Continetti, people aren't laughing at you. They're listening to you. Thank you for spending time with me. Follow him on X at Continetti. Read him at the Washington Free Beacon and listen to him on the Commentary Podcast. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Hugh.